Now, the quiet backwaters and the river estuaries of Essex are a world away from the high-heeled girls and the used car salesmen so often portrayed in the national media. In the latest programme, In a Sense of Place, the documentary series that captures the defining characteristics of people and where they live, Essex fishermen from West Mersea and Leigh-on-Sea reflect on their livelihood and their special relationship with the sea.
The Essex coastline is 440 kilometres, and it's the longest coastline of any county in Britain. So I'm told, but then that may be Essex hyperbole. I suspect that's somewhere around about 300 odd miles. That's an enormous, long coastline, and that's with all the creeks and rills and inlets and rivers, and it's just an amazing asset, and it's something that people scunt up and down the A12, or they live in the inland towns, and they don't realise what they've got right on their doorstep, and it's so beautiful. Not obviously so, but you see it, and the more you see it, the more you realise how brilliant it is. It's very beautiful, it's very dangerous in terms of fishing and sailing. It's an area of water that's been protected by some savage sandbanks. You got the Buxie, the Gunfleet, the Knock John, the Burrows, all sorts of sands and shoals. And it's also one of the oldest parts of England. It's where all the invasions have come from. You know, when you look back and you think there's been Vikings and Romans and all the trade that made this country what it is, all come in through the Thames estuary. Well, I'm John Jowers, and I'm Vice Chairman of the Fishermen's Association. I'm a fisherman and fish merchant from West Mersea, which is where I am, standing on the fisherman's jetty on a brilliant, clear winter's day, looking out over the creeks and watching the oystermen unloading their skiffs. I suppose you could call it the Essex Alps, really. All we can see is the well, we can see for miles and miles. We can see the surroundings of the River Blackwater, all the creeks running in, Wigborough Hill, Sawcock Creek, Tollsbury, Bradwell, Peldon with the church. It was wobbled a bit in the earthquake. What we can see actually is rural England at its best, at the best time of the year as well. It's addictive. It is this wide, white, clear East Anglian light. And it's the softness of the contours, and it's the way the mud runs into the water, and it's the way that people are working as they've worked for centuries here. It's very reassuring, sort of state of not too much change in a rapidly changing world. Always been a long tradition here of herring drift netting. In fact, so long that it probably goes back pre-Christian. It's exactly the same thing that happened on the Lake of Galilee. And that's where we throw about £8,000 worth of equipment over the side and hope we're going to get it back at the end of the day. And they're nets that hang suspended in the water on cork floats. The herrings are swimming along, they rise up at dusk and the dawn, follow the plankton, and they swim into the meshes. Little ones go through, so we don't catch the brood stock. Big ones bounce off. We catch the size we target for. And it's not the most efficient way, because once you've caught them, you then got to haul the nets in and shake these blasted things out. It's not the easiest of things. But tremendously satisfying, because you're sitting there, dawn's breaking, there's a bit of light mist on the water. You lift up the pole end net. They call it having a look on. And you see these herons jiggling about it. And what you're seeing is a continuity of a way of life that hasn't changed since the first man made the first net. In the herring trade, one of the best fishermen here is Andrew French, together with his son Jonathan. And he runs his boat from West Mersea, and in the summer they catch bass and soles and mullet and skate. But in the winter he goes to his real love, and that's herring drifting.
Inshore waters forecast for the area Wash to North Foreland and 12 miles offshore, issued by the Met Office at 0500. Today, Monday the 26th of November. The wind, northwest 4, later west to northwest 3. The weather, fair, visibility good. The sea state, slight, later smooth or slight.
We set off at 5:30 from West Mersea in the dark and the cold, and travelled across the Dengie Flats and then the Maplin Sands to the top of the Swin, where we found some marks on the echo sounder which we hope are herring, and shot the nets, and we're just waiting now for the herring to swim in. Oh, good morning. That's us just come onto your area wanting to pass over to the Maplin Buoy. Are we all clear, please?
So you're all clear today, clear to make your best calls.
I was born into a fishing family. My father was a fisherman, and before him his father and grandfather were oystermen. The first time I came on my own account, I had a little 23-foot skiff. We used to go herring fishing after school, and that's all we could think about all day was getting home from school, not bothering with the homework, going out and catching some fish. But unless you're born to it, unless you're born into a seafaring family these days, you're not gonna stick it. It's very unusual that someone comes into the job in their 30s, 40s and sticks it and makes a go of it. It's a way of life that I was brought up to as a young boy. I saw my father go out long hours, day after day after day, and it was something that was natural and normal. Whereas comparing this to a normal job, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it just doesn't bear any comparison. For instance, last year we actually made a loss. We had a bad year with lots of repairs needed on the boat, which meant that we got all our tax back that we'd paid. So that was a plus, I suppose. I did have 5 years as a milkman. Fortunately, it's now about 10 years back in the dim, distant past, and I hated every minute. The fishing took a downturn, and I felt I had to try and do something else, but regretted it from the first day. The holidays that we had, I used to come out with some of the other fishing boats often. All the time off that I had during that period, I spent building a little boat with the dream of getting back fishing. I felt I was tied down. I'd never worked for somebody else in that respect for a firm before in my life, and they were always on your back over one thing or another. And out here you're your own boss. It was just a completely different way of life altogether, which I'd not been used to and didn't like. Out fishing, you're away from the madding crowd. And although these days there's far greater input from bureaucrats, and we've got to have bits of paper for this and that and everything, you're still away from it out here. It's the freedom really of it that appeals. It's the pace of life is different. Well, it's what you make it in a way, I suppose, but you're in control of what you do far more than you are ashore. It's the fresh air partly, isn't it? The clean, fresh air. You're closer to nature. Invariably, we see the sunrise if there's no cloud cover. And the moon at night is something to behold out at sea, completely different than ashore. No street lights to mask the effect of, the night sky and everything like that. A few times we've had narrow squeaks with flooding the boat, And once we managed to get ashore, quite close to here actually, on the Maplin Sands, when we were bass fishing one autumn. We were fishing a new area and we shot the nets and they were drifting off fine, so we thought, and then we managed to get the boat ashore on a sandbank. We were stuck fast, couldn't get off, and the nets drifted off into the wild blue yonder, we didn't know where. And come daylight, we heard this engine noise in the distance, and as soon as we heard it, we realised it was the hovercraft coming to police the area, because they were going to open up on the firing range. And this hovercraft parked alongside us, and this army type emerged, stood arms akimbo and said to us, "Do you realise you're sitting right in the middle of our firing range?" We explained to him that we did, and we were sorry we got ashore in the dark. The next thing is, he said, "Well, you can't stay here. You'll have to come with us, anchor the boat up, because we're going to start firing in half an hour." So I panicked for a bit, said a quick prayer, and wondered whatever to do. I managed at the last minute to get hold of one of the other fishing boats, who agreed to come and try and find our nets for us. And half an hour later they came back and took us away. He said, "Don't worry about the boat," he said, "we'll aim to miss it." So we were thankful for that. And away we went into Shoebury-Ness, in the army base there. When we arrived, we drew up on the ramp. There was a police car, military police car, waiting for us. We had to go and sit in the police station and have our credentials checked. Eventually it was all right, and we were told we couldn't stay there either, so we had to sit on Shoebury-Ness beach while we waited. There we were, 9 o'clock on this lovely glorious autumn morning, wondering whatever we were doing there with our boat stranded about 4 miles away. We could just see it in the distance. We waited and waited, and then eventually they took us back. The tide had come up and the boat was all afloat, and away we went. And we found out afterwards that our friends had found our nets for us. There was a record catch of fish, and they'd taken the fish out of the nets, put ice on them, and given them to the fish merchant. And 2 weeks later we received payment, and we hadn't even seen the fish, so that was a good outcome.
If you go to sea, you're part of an elite band, really. And I suspect that fishermen rightly see themselves as that. Nothing wrong with it at all. Fishermen go everywhere. They take horrendous risks sometimes. They think there's fish in a certain place. They go in all the little nooks and crannies and the out-of-the-way bits where no one else does. And they know it intimately. They know it like their back garden. It's almost like going out to meet a friend in a way. Try and get a bit more than the chap next to you. Always competitive. Oh dear, is it competitive. And that spurs them on. Of course, what's also forgotten a lot of the time is that these hugely productive waters in the Thames estuary aren't just for fish. In all those sandbanks and gullyways and swatchways, it's full of shellfish as well. And they produce specialist fishermen, particularly those who go after cockles. And there's none better than those from Leigh. And when you get people like Stevie Dell and Les Snell, well, they've had to change with the times.
When I left school, I didn't come straight down here. I worked in engineering for about 10 years. I was an engineer at Forge. And working in a factory, it's soul destroying, like, you know. Even though I was doing an interesting job, you know, when you get up in the morning, you don't see the sun all day long, you know, and then you sort of come out at night and it's pitch black. When you compare it to a job like this, there's no comparison, you know. I do a job that I love, and I do funny old hours, but I get to spend a lot of time with a wife and kids, and it's just really good. It's a nice way of life. It's one of them jobs that when it's like really good, it's just a joy, and when it's bad, it's absolutely diabolical. Like last week, yeah.
They made restrictions on us that we, you know, because we had the toxin in the water, that we wasn't allowed too far down the river, so therefore we had to work twice as long for our cockles. Where we like today, we got our cockles in about 3.5 hours, a quota what we're allowed. Last week we was working up to 8 hours for the same amount of cockles. Some days we've only been gone 5 or 6 hours, and another day, even the good days like today, still only 12 hours. But though last week it was 16 hours, you know what I mean? And then if you get the bad weather on top of it all,
it'll be blowing a gale and you can't get no cockles, and you think yourself, why the bleeding hell am I doing this? But it's just it's a great thing to do.
Been doing it all my life since I left school, and I'm 65 now, so you know, it's a few years. I had a couple of years away and worked for Lang's and that, but the cockling was so bad then. All the fellas who worked down here, we all have a slag off at each other, but that's part of the job, like, you know. We even swear at each other. Some of the chaps out there, they call me gobby or something like that, but you just take all that in your stride. I know I talk too much anyway, so it's this rub like water off a duck's back, you know. They mostly be lost without me.
Yeah, everybody moans and groans and shouts and hollers at each other, and one minute you're sort of swearing and effing and blinding at someone, and the next minute they're all mates again, you know.
The cockle beds, like the sandbanks, are like, we know them like people know the M25. Like, you know, we know all the little holes, and because the army fire shells on the mud and there's rubbish and wrecks and things, and we just know them all off by heart. But now we've got nice modern equipment like plotters and things like that, which make it even easier. I mean, when I first started, we didn't even have a sounder on the boat or anything like that, you know, and didn't have a radio or nothing, just left the mooring with an alarm clock and a compass. And that was it. Like, but I mean, the things we got now is unbelievable. 2 radars, 2 plotters, sounders, radios. We even got a television aboard that we can watch, you know what I mean? And, well, you know, it's just good life, like I said. You know, you can't knock it, really. I mean, I wouldn't still be here, would I? You know, I'm retired. Well, March I was 65. I'll do a few more years if you keep me going. I mean, this is the governor's son. He's me governor in a sort of a way, really, although he calls me the skipper of the boat, which I am, but he takes the boat the same as I do, you know what I mean? It's a 46-foot boat, 16-foot beam. It's got a 300 horsepower engine to drive the boat along, and 180 horsepower to drive the pump for the hydraulics and pulling up the cockles and things like that. As you can see, like, there's that large pipe there. That's what the cockles come up through, and the small pipe is like the pressure pipe what washes the cockles out the sand. And then you've got your screen on there which rotates and gets all the small cockles out, and that has to be a certain size because we, you know, like 16 mil, so it lets all the small cockles back over the side. I'm quite fortunate at the twilight of my life to be going out on a nice boat. You know, we used to have an old wooden boat before. If you like to look over there, I think it's there, that green one over there, the Navigator. That was the boat I used to work on, you know, when we didn't have any equipment or anything, like, you know. There's 1 or 2 of us here, like you got Stevie Medal and there's Mason, and they've been at it like since they were boys, and our boat as well, and Steve here. And, you know, perhaps we'll have a little edge on some of the others, you know what I mean? Because there's some boats that are still out there now cockling, and we went out all at the same time. So there is a bit of skill to it, you know. You can't just go up down the labour exchange and get a fella from there and bring him here and take him out on the boat.
Now we have a shutdown period every year when we're not allowed to go to the sea for 6 months, like. And probably by the end of the year, you know, like this time of year, you start getting a bit of wind and the cockles are getting thinner, and it does get a little bit hard work sometimes, and sometimes it's a little bit frustrating. You think, be pleased when this year's over. And then you get your sort of layout period, and then into about sort of 2 or 3 months into that layout period, you think, oh, can't wait to get back to work.
But then in the winter time, we're maintaining like the boat and all the gear so that we're really up running for next year, and all the little jobs up the shed, things fall to bits and all that, you know, like we've got to do the job, shaft on the boat and new propeller and all sorts of things like that, you know, have the engine overhauled and things like that, and that's what we do in the winter time.
When you're out there and you get a lovely, you know, sort of a nice still morning and see the old sun coming up, and then sometimes we're there and we're working and you think, oh, what's that in the water? And there'll be an old seal popping its head up, you know, things like that. You know, it's beautiful. People don't get to see some of the things that we get to see, and it is lovely, like, you know. And, you know, people say about all these wonderful places in the world that are beautiful, and you've got all this on your doorstep and people don't even know it's there, you know. Like I say, when you're coming into Leigh and you look up and you see the remains of Adley Castle, you know, there's all sorts of, you know, wildlife. Like I say, if you go off what we call Mush End, which is off Canvey Point here, there's a little colony of seals that have been there, you know, for about 5 or 6 years now. There's 6 or 7 seals get there each year, you know, and people go, they're on the telly about, oh, they'd run seal watching trips. Well, off the end of Canvey, there's seals, you know, people don't even know they're there.
Sometimes we're working down off Foulness there, and you know, and you look ashore and the scenery's nice. I mean, I live at Wakering, and you look ashore and I'm saying, yeah, well, I live just there, like, you know, and at Westcliff, you look ashore or come into Leigh here and Chalkwell and that. I don't know, it just looks nice to me. It looks nice, you know. That's all part of your life being a fisherman, I suppose. I don't know, you know, but maybe we like things, simple things, you know.
Now, when we land the fish and we get back on shore, most of it is exported, most of it leaves Essex. But at West Mersea, where the company shed is run by Richard and Heather Howard, the best, the prime, the cream of the fish that we land is sold there, and of course that's why it's got the huge reputation for the quality of its locally caught fish.
I never anticipated it being like this, and I think because we've kept it simple, that's what people love. And I mean, I think it's unique, and I think that's why a lot of people come here. Like all the chairs and tables and that all come from different friends, and the small church chairs came from East Mersea Church. When we had new chairs up there, I had the old ones. The tables could be anywhere, like one was from my niece, another one was from a friend. The church poos I got from what they call City Hall, which is a little chapel just up the lane from here. The other poo over there was from the Quaker Meeting House in Leigh. That bench there I did buy because I've sort of done that in remembrance of my dad, because he used to come down here twice a day, every day. It says, in loving memory of Luke Green, a true Mersey gentleman. And when I mean gentleman, I don't mean gentleman in, smart, like Rupert Bear suit. I mean gentleman as in gentle man. He was what I call a proper old Essex, a nice, soft Essex gentleman. On one wall I've got some old photographs which are all of my family and Rich's family, like our grandparents, great-grandparents. That is one of my loves, is sort of like local history. We've got Blackbird on the wall just asking you only to bring bread and drink and no salad, etc, etc. Oh, there's an original, when the oyster company was formed, the Tollesbury Mersey Native Oyster Fishery Company was formed in 1870-something. 1879. Well, I've got the original notice, like the Articles of Association, things like that on the wall. And then I've just got these funny, like, glass fish that different people come in and look and see, and I've got one of them hanging about in my cupboard. You want it? I am proud of it. I've got to be honest. That is my sort of baby, and I am very proud of it. I really had to throw my heart and soul into it, which I did, which it wasn't easy to start with. I like to think I've nurtured it over the years, and that's why it's now become what it's become.
Of course, fishing is the last of the hunters. We're predators, and there are very few left in this sort of modern world. We're also extremely multi-skilled, have to be shipwrights, electronics engineers, net makers, all sorts of things. And the epitome of this is Alan Bird. He's a West Mersea man with a passion for what he does, and he does a multitude of things.
As an oyster grower, I have to work with nature very much. I have to be aware of nature very much. And I can only put a small contribution into nature, and there's no way of going against it. So I watch everything. I watch the birds, I watch everything that moves on the waterfront, and I learn as much as I can. Even though after 40 years of being here, I've got more questions than when I started. I came to Mersey when I was a young child and looked at the waterfront and the oyster growers and thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I was always drawn to the water, and I just loved the Essex saltings and mudflats. It's always been very dear to me. A lot of my work is done in the creeks where the oysters are growing, and the creeks are full of wildlife, and I'll grow my oysters in the creek, on the edge of the creek, as people have done for nearly 1,000 years. The sea is always changing. Everything is different. No day is the same. And even on a cold, dark winter's day, there's lots going on out there, whereas the land seems very dull and dreary. My life is in the creek, on the water, in the River Blackwater. I feel as though I'm an alien to the land. If I go into Colchester, I feel like I'm perhaps from outer space, you know. They're certainly different people to what I am. I've got different values to what they have. If I wasn't here, I'd die very quickly. I couldn't survive without being here because it's part of me and I'm part of it. I can't survive without it. If I go on holiday, and within a few days I want to come home quick. I hate it. My wife likes holidays, but I'm not keen. There's nowhere else that I know of it's like the Mersey Island. If you go to a lot of places, the fishing has died, the oysters have died, and they're only commuter yacht centres. Mersey is not a commuter yacht centre. Mersey is still a living, breathing community. I'm a caretaker for the creeks around West Mersea. I try to look after things, and also I like to think that I have maybe bring new ideas to West Mersea and try and help the young boys progress in their work as well. It's very important to keep the tradition going and to help the young boys keep this wonderful place going that we've got. I feel that's my place.
It's a choice. In this modern times, you can go anywhere, anytime, do whatever you want. But I think sometimes what's right in front of your nose is overlooked. And in my case, Mersey is an amazing place to live. It's still live and working. It's not been sort of overwhelmed by a technical revolution. It's an egalitarian, pleasant, friendly, very beautiful place. We see ourselves as a community, a band of friends really, but we're also part of a much wider community that looks outward, goes on the water.
If someone took me away from the sea, I would hate it. I'm scared of the sea, but I can't bear to live away from it. You know, I just think every day the tide's going to come up and go down, come up and go down, and it's just sort of, I just feel I belong here. I can feel it in my bones, you know.
A Sense of Place, Fish Out of Water was produced for BBC Essex by Anton Jarvis, with music specially composed and performed by Chris Jones.